I'm going to try again. Oh, after that last interruption. The history of the development of AIDS. A chapter excerpt from State of Origin, the evidence of the laboratory birth of AIDS, written by Boyd E. Graves, J.D. When I go like this, it means that I'm quoting from the document, and it's emphasized with the quotation marks. I'm doing this because some of you like to hear things and can absorb more information that way rather than reading it for yourself, but you can read this at the website of Dr. Graves. And anyway, let's get into it because it's really very macabre. Okay, the true history of the origin of AIDS can be traced throughout the 20th century and back to 1878. On April the 29th of that year, the United States passed a Federal Quarantine Act. The United States began a significant effort to investigate causes of epidemic diseases. In 1887, the effort was enhanced with the mandate of the U.S. Laboratory of Hygiene. This lab was run by Dr. Joseph J. Kenyon, a deep-rooted racist who served the eugenics movement with dedication. 2 years later, in 1889, we were able to identify mycoplasma, a transmissible agent that is now found at the heart of human diseases, including AIDS, HIV. Dr. Graves uses "we" as he has summarized this timeline, and this is the excerpt from his book, so he's identifying himself as in American or the US government when he says "we." In 1893, we strengthened the Federal Quarantine Act, and suddenly there was an explosion of polio. In 1898, we knew that we could use mycoplasma to cause epidemics because we were able to do so in cattle, and we saw it in tobacco plants. In 1889, the US Congress began investigating leprosy in the United States. In 1902, we organized a station for experimental evolution, and we were able to identify diseases of an ethnic nature. In 1904, we used mycoplasma to cause an epidemic in horses. And then again in 1910, we used mycoplasma to cause an epidemic in fowls or birds. In 1917, we formed the Federation of the American Society for Experimental Biology, or FASEB. In 1918, the influenza virus killed millions of unsuspecting. That was the Spanish flu virus. It was a flu virus modified with the bird mycoplasma, for which human primates had no acquired immunity. In 1921, lead eugenics philosopher Bertrand Russell publicly supported the, get a load of this, necessity for organized plague against the black population. Are you hearing what is being quoted here, what is being discovered and now put down in writing? There's lots out there that are... Anyway, it's another thing to actually see it in writing. In 1931, we secretly tested African Americans, and we tested AIDS in sheep. In 1935, we learned that we could crystallize, now this is really important, we learned that we could crystallize the tobacco mycoplasma, and it would remain infectious. If any of you know anything about the Royal Rife discoveries, he discovered that crystallized form of the mycoplasma, and he was able to link, of course, the crystalline form of it to disease and cancers in particular, and he began curing, but because he could blast then the crystal using the Rife machine that he developed, and he was curing people of unimaginable cancers and those that were terminally ill, and he had amazing results. But of course, didn't last very long. All of his efforts went to the wall when his laboratories were raided, all of his equipment was stolen, and all of his work and research was well, was stolen. Now you can see why. He had actually discovered what they'd been doing long before anybody else had. Okay. So where do we get down to? Alright, we've passed 1935. Now this is interesting considering the work that Brown and myself are doing in Papua New Guinea. Listen to this. In 1943, we officially began our bio-warfare program. Shortly thereafter, we were finding our way to New Guinea to study mycoplasma in humans. I want to refer to another document for the moment. This refers to 1942. These two documents kind of, one complements the other. Mad cow disease, or Kuru, K-U-R-U, in the Foray tribe. Before and during World War II, at the infamous Camp 731 in Manchuria, the Japanese military contaminated prisoners of war with certain disease agents. They also established a research camp in New Guinea in 1942. Now remember here, the timeline they're saying in 1943, we officially began our bio-war, and shortly thereafter we're in New Guinea. Well, they were in New Guinea because they'd already started it in 1942, and they were getting down there to see how things were going. There they experimented upon the Foray Indian tribes and inoculated them with a minced-up version of the brains of deceased sheep, containing the Visna virus, which causes mad cow disease, or Creutzfeldt and Endash, aka Jacob disease. About 5 or 6 years later, after the Japanese had driven out the poor people of the Foray tribe, developed what they called Kuru, which was their word for wasting, and they began to shake, lose their appetite, and die. The autopsies revealed that their brains had literally turned to mush. They had contracted mad cow disease from the Japanese experiment. When World War II ended, Dr. Ishii Shiro, the medical doctor who was commissioned as a general in the Japanese army so he could take command of Japan's biological warfare development, testing and deployment, was captured. Listen to this. He was given the choice of a job with the United States Army or execution as a war criminal. Not surprisingly, Dr. Ishii Shiro chose to work with the US military to demonstrate how the Japanese had created mad cow disease in the Foray Indian tribe. In 1957, when the disease was beginning to blossom in full among the Foray people, Dr. Carlton Kajdusek of the US National Institutes of Health headed to New Guinea to determine how the minced-up brains of the Visna-infected sheep affected them. He spent a couple of years there studying the Foray people and wrote an extensive report. He won the Nobel Prize for discovering Kuru disease in the Foray tribe. Have you ever heard anything more sickening? This now is the evidence of what has been going on since 1878. But I'll continue with the timeline. We're only up to 1943 here. We've got a few years to go. In 1945, we witnessed the greatest influx of foreign scientists in history into the US biological program. Operation Paperclip will live in infamy as one of the darkest programs of a twisted parallel government fixed on genocide. In 1946, the United States Navy hired Dr. Earl Traub, a notorious racist biologist. A May Appropriations hearing confirms the existence of a secret biological weapon. In 1948, we know that the United States confirmed the endorsement of devising a scheme in which to address the issue of overpopulation in certain racial groups. State Department George McKernan's memo will forever illuminate the eugenics mendacity necessary for genocide of millions of innocent people. I'll continue on the next video.